webinar is about, specific case study. It's a Web3 branding and marketing case study. And in this, what I'll do is I will introduce you how the whole progression happened, why we made the decisions we made, what are the designs that we made, how we made them, uh, like what the client exactly does, and how the Web3 thing works for the client. And then we will also jump into some of the design files and how exactly they were designed, what are the different techniques that we use, the different layers, the applications, and the brand elements and stuff like that. And to introduce myself, as you can see, I am Aditya. I am branding lead, and beside that, I run a time branding agency, which is XAXs Corps, and like I'm the founder and creative director of the agency. And so I think we have all the bases covered, and let's properly begin. I'll start with going through the case study, which is wait. The case study will focus is on a brand called WheelCoin, and WheelCoin is both the brand and the crypto of it. It is a move to earn Web3 brand, while move to earn is a system where you move from one place to another, and the distance you travel gets converted into some form of currency. In this case, the currency is their own crypto, which is WheelCoin. And that's also an application that you use. It's a SaaS brand as well, and the whole concept of them is a sustainability based move to earn Web3 crypto brand. And the sustainability concept is that they have a base carbon emission value, which is, let's say, the carbon you would emit by moving from place A to place B on a car, and that is the base value. And now, let's say you move from place A to place B with the WheelCoin application tracker on. In some other forms of transportation, let's say you are cycling there, let's say you are walking there, let's say you are running there, or let's say you're taking a public transport. And based on what mode of transportation it is, it calculates the difference in carbon emission from the base value of what a car would produce. And then based on how much carbon emission you are saving, you get a reward in the form of WheelCoin. And that WheelCoin crypto can help you unlock NFTs, which you can exchange. Or you can use the WheelCoin currency in exchange for discounts and special offers with partner brands onto their application. That's the whole concept of it. We will not get too deep into the platform. I'm just giving you a base of it so that you understand why we did what we did from the branding and marketing standpoint. And like anything else, we definitely start with. So we start with the color palette. In this case, it has three aspects to cover. So when you design the brand color palette, you need to consider a few aspects. There are three core aspects to cover in terms of any brand palette. The one is what the brand persona is. The second is who are you targeting, and the third is what thematics or industry segment are you playing in. In case of WheelCoin, the persona is that it's a tech savvy brand, but it's a consumer focused tech savvy sustainability brand. So, and the target audience is not someone too tech savvy because it's a mobile first Web3 application. But they need to be environmentally conscious because that's where the reward comes from, which is saving carbon emission. So those are the three aspects they're taking care. Hence, the tech savvy aspect is being covered by the blue spectrum of the color palette and the gradient in the color palette, while the green side takes care of the sustainability aspect. And these are also taken from the logo, and there are different hierarchies in terms of how deep the hue is, how saturated the hue is, or how light the hue is. So to that, it have different portions of a color to play with for different types of applications, which I'll showcase later on. And if you look at the logo, then you can see that um, the logo is quite colorful, although it is playing in a close spectrum of colors, and that's where we derive the color palette from. And so, in case of branding and marketing, the main core focus, the main channel of marketing uh, was Twitter. That's because if you look into the rise of Web3, Twitter was the core platform that the whole Web3 and blockchain segment rose on. That slowly changed with everything that's happening with Twitter and other community-based platforms to precedence, for example, Discord being one. But when this brand was starting to launch and make a market share of its own, Twitter was the core platform, which is why the social media designs are a bit wide. It's close to the 4:3 ratio, which is the ratio you see in Twitter, which is different from other go-to social media ratio, which is usually 1:1, the square format, or 4:5 vertical format. While in case of Twitter, if you put a 1:1 image or a 4:5 image, it gets cropped in the view and you need to click to make it give it a full view. So the wider view is more optimum for the platform. And this is something that you need to keep in mind while you are designing something. You don't just need to think about who you are designing it for, what you are designing it for, what is the goal of that specific creative. You also need to take into account the platform where the creative will lie. And the images that we're seeing at the moment are thematic posts that were targeted on some very core messages related to maybe something happening, for example, New Year wish, or Christmas wish, or some very specific information, for example, brand collaboration, or covering some very specific incidents, for example, the COP summit, which is a very important summit for the sustainability space, where the UN and international partners come into play, uh, where different countries put forward what they're doing to, have the SDGs or sustainable development goals moving forward for the whole 2030 agenda that UN has put up. And in this case, the main COP we were focusing on were the COP27, which is a few years back. And then let's talk about the typography. Once again, like any other brand elements, the typography also need to take into account the personality of the brand, what the brand is trying to do, and where most of the brand touch points will lie. Now, as I mentioned, this is a SaaS brand. So 90% of the touch point would lie on a digital platform. And Inter is a sans serif font. And it's a sans serif font that has been specifically designed to look good and work well in digital platforms. Hence, it was a pretty obvious choice. There's nothing very deep about it. It's the most practical font to use for what we're trying to do. And Printed is a variable typeface, so there's a lot of different styles that we can use. But we stuck to the regular weight and the bold weight. We did not use italics and all the different stages in between. So that's something we confined ourselves to maintain a uniform visual identity that slowly over the time becomes recognizable. And the other thing that the brand was doing, now the brand launched primarily in Europe and Latin America, but it's not a physically confined brand. It's a SaaS brand that is focused on uh, sustainable goals on the carbon footprint element. Hence, it had a global audience. And in order to connect with the global audience, something we did is we celebrated important days of different nations. Independence Day is a common theme among different nations. In some cases, the name is a bit different. Some nations which did not exactly have a Independence Day have some subsidiary to that, which can be a foundation day or stuff like that. And when you look at the different celebrations that we did, you can see that a theme is emerging. Since uh, it's a kind of communication that is connected on a theme, the visual angle also is connected by a theme, by pattern that is recognizable because it's a pattern that can be repeated. In this case, in case you happen to notice, let me point out what are the elements that we're repeating. Firstly, of course, we're using the typeface inter and only in the combination of bold and regular. And in there is, of course, the uh, visual hierarchy in terms of typeface. There's the heading, subheading, and sub body or subtext. There are the CTS, which are highlighted by the gradient that I pointed out while I was talking about the brand color palette. And you can see that concentric circles is a thing that is repeating, and that has two purposes. Firstly, it's a Web3 brand, and it's connecting globally. So concentric circles plays into that connectivity and the ripple effect. And since we're using the concentric circle repeatedly, we're also using elements that fit onto the circle. For example, in this case, we're talking about different nations, and the most obvious symbol of a nation is the nation's flag. But since once again we're using circles, we have confined the flag in a way that it fits in circle. It's not just a crop. There are some uh, flags that directly can be fit in a circle. For example, Japan is a very easy example. In some cases, it needs a little adjustment in a way that is still recognizable. It does not shift away from what the flag is, but it fits in the circle. So that's where little attention to detail comes in. The other repeating factor is we're focusing on some important monument or an important mode of transportation, which is a part of the nation. Because, as I said, WheelCoin is moved to it's focused on mobility. So we need to make that connection. And the other thing monuments does are they're also something people travel to. Tourism also involves a lot of movement. Once again, it comes back to the mobility aspect from the move to earn aspect. And we're also using the flags, sorry, the maps, but we're using the maps in very specific way. We use either putting it in the gradient, which is the blue to green gradient that once again I mentioned during the brand color palette discussion, or we're using it as an image and making the rest blank. And how much of the map we're using depends on the map because, well, the maps vary quite a bit, and one go-to formula might not fit for all the maps, and it did not, as you can see. So that's where we're using a little bit of mix and match depending on what works. But the theme is connected and the patterns are being repeated, which is how a brand forms and form of identity over the time. A single poster will not form a brand identity, but a series of, let's say, 10, 12 posters can form a brand identity if they follow a recognizable pattern that's being repeated. The goal of a branding exercise is take a brand to the point that you can remove the name of the brand, the logo of the brand, and still people will recognize that this is something from some specific brand. That is the goal. And we achieve that by repeating patterns, which slowly becomes recognizable. In another effort that comes into play while you're making something recognizable is to use things. Once again, falling back to the repeating patterns thing. Something that comes into play a lot are different icons for different tasks. It depends on what the task is. And this is where a very important part of branding is a design system or a brand guide. They are connected to each other. The terminology depends a bit depending on which market segment you're talking about, but they work in a similar way. In this case, we developed a icon library, and what the icon library did is it did two things. Firstly, once you have an icon library, you don't necessarily have to start with a massive icon library. You can slowly build it over the time depending on you what becomes necessary to use. And you can make sure that, let's say you have three icons and you need a new fourth icon. Make sure that the fourth icon fits in a style frame of the existing three icons. In case of WheelCoin, you can see that we're repeating the circles once again because that makes a huge connectivity and mobility aspect, which is connected to the brand's personality. And we are also using the gradient And you can see the entire icon library is built on the gradient. And when it comes to, you can see that we have also recreated some other brand logos such as Twitter, Android, Apple, and Discord. And as a icon, that is okay because uh, we are using this as a representation of the brand, not as a replacement of the brand's actual logo. So this is a distinction that we need to keep in mind because mm, brands have strict guidelines of how you can use their logo. And let's say we were representing Apple as a brand, we could not use it in this WheelCon specific gradient. But here using Apple to indicate something with respect to WheelCon. So in this context, the WheelCon brand identity takes precedence over Apple's brand identity. So this is a hierarchical distinction that we need to keep in mind while we're working on one brand and another brand comes into context. And well, this was the icon library that we built over the time. We can see that it has one for offers, one for person, one to represent crypto, one to represent the currency, fiat currency, I mean, one to like something, then the popular social medias it was playing into, one for announcement, one for notification, one to denote climate change in the forms of global warming, hence the thermometer, one for savings, one for community, and core carbon emission because that's something we was the main aspect the brand was targeting, a few modes of transportation, and yep, that was there were a few more icons, but this was the core icon library that we used the most. And of course, like as I mentioned, Twitter was the core social media where they existed, and you cannot just post something. You need to also brand the social media page and make it own. And obvious part of that is our, of course, the cover image. And in the cover image, what we did is we played into, of course, the typography and the color palette, and we put out some of the uh, important screens from the application of the brand. The screens are from the application directly. You can see it shows how much uh, carbon output, carbon emission user has saved, of some amount of Bitcoin the user has earned, and something the user has unlocked. So covering some key aspects of the application without making it too complicated. That's how advertisements work, focus on key aspects so that uh, it makes the target audience want to try it out. That's the whole goal. And then came the core brand communication, which is covering the features of the application, the updates of the application, and some community engagements. For example, most of these posts, and you can see these posts follow a more closely neat pattern. They are more close to each other in terms of how they look because these are the most important brand recognition posts. These are directly focused on the brand's features itself, the application's features itself, what the application is doing, what you can expect from the application. Hence, recognizability is most important for this kind of posts. And once again, just like other posts, the typography is repeating, the gradient is repeating, the whole color palette is repeating. And since these are focused on the application and the background is secondary, in a lot of cases, the background is white. And to make it less boring, we are using the brand's logo in an abstracted form, in a lower opacity to make the background a little more ownable. And we're using mockups for obvious reasons because we're talking about an application. And we're highlighting key aspects of the application by having a larger screenshot, having a highlighted part of the screen outside of the mockup and pointing out that, well, look, this is the core aspect of this particular communication. And what something that the brand did later on was come up with an NFT collection. And the NFT collection was tied up to different locations of different important cities spread across the world. And that is something that became a campaign of itself, which is, you can see that we are focusing on some brands from some locations from India, Spain, Brazil, Sri Lanka, and stuff like that. They look even closer to each other because they're part of a single campaign. uh, you cannot have a campaign where everything looks different from each other, even if they look from a single brand. That's how campaigns work. They are even more tied together. And those were the key types of marketing designs that we did. And these are some of my favorite posts that I did. Yeah, these are a bit varied because this is my favorite pick among the ones I did, and that kind of completes the core part. And we'll of course move on to some of the project files themselves and have a deeper dive into. Okay, remember I mentioned about building a icon library. So this is a little more than icon library. This is a vector library that I prepared while working with the brand for quite a few months. So it's not something that we did in one day. The benefit of a library, as I mentioned earlier, is that you don't have to search for the things again and again. You can move back to the library and check if it's already there. If it's there, just use it. It's both saving time and making the final output a little more recognizable because you're reusing specific brand elements. And this has quite a few different things, like some important communications that we are covering. This is the climate change initiative of UN. This is the COP27. Some brands we have been using, some flags that we use to communicate with that country-specific audience, the maps of the countries. This is part of the icon library I showed you, and some screen elements from the brand. Now, these screen elements are the different NFTs that I mentioned about, which is connected to different mobility elements. In case of, let's say, this, in case of Bangalore, there are different uh, one railway station and three metro stations. So it's connected, directly connected to what the brand is trying to do. This was the overall vector library that built over the time. This was for personal use, hence it does not look that good. It's just utilitarian, but it came in handy quite a bit. Okay. Firstly, I'll show you how the layers are arranged. Because what happens when you arrange your layers right is that you can use the same setup for different creatives without starting from scratch. And in this case, this is the logo, which is this. Then there is copy, which is the whole text part. The hero is the main design element. This background is the behind. And inside a background, it depends on inside a background. There are different gradients. In this particular case, they haven't been used for the background, but they have been used for the hero. You can see that there is the circles. This is the map. This is the uh, mobility, the famous mobility thing that is the famous metro from Thailand. This is the, yep, this is the gradient for the map. Let me show you how this might look. So it starts from the map where we are overlaying the image, then we are overlaying the gradient. Now this image is the same image, which is this, with the mask, of course. There are the concentric circles, there is the country map, and in case of copy. This is the core copy, and there's a highlight which is using the brand specific green color, and of course there is the logo on top. Now this is also following a simple similar pattern, but since we are using a darker background, this blue is also part of the color palette. We're using the logo with a white overlay, but the gradient is repeating, the concentric circles are repeating, the map is repeating, the monument is repeating, and even for the map, the gradient is once again repeating. In this case, most of it has been done in Illustrator, which is my favorite application. Oh, by the way, when you are this is a project that, although I'm focusing on the designs that I created, there were other people working on the project as well. Hence, and for the team I was working with, which was for an agency called Blockways, uh, the chosen application was Photoshop. So everyone in the team was using Photoshop. Hence, although Illustrator is my favorite application, the code design had to stay on Photoshop so that if needed, others can also work on it. And that is something that you need to keep in mind while working with the team. There should be a common place where all the team can meet at the same place. In this particular case, that was Photoshop. So even though this is primarily designed in Illustrator, different parts of it are broken down so that it can be used in Photoshop. As you can see, this is separately exported. The stadium is separately exported. The background is separately exported. And yes, let me glance through some others. This is one. Once again, here this guy is an important is a founding figure of weather reporting. So we don't have countries here, but we keep the circular thing intact by putting the person here. And you can see even for the weather balloon, the gradient is repeating. For the concentric circle, the green color is repeating, but the circle is staying. And this is a clouds background. Here we are once again using the logo for the background, different colors to for different colors from the brand palette for hierarchy, the elements from the icon library, and once again concentric circles. This once again is following the most of the things being designed in Illustrator, but they're compiled in Photoshop for the same reason. Here we have instead of country, we have the logo from where the source material is taken. It's a nature climate change. It's a publication that's focused on climate change. This is the campaign I was talking about. So we've figured out a pattern that could be repeat across all the different collectibles. So these are the digital collectibles, and here we have Barcelona. Hence, this background is from Barcelona. We have Spain because Barcelona is part of Spain, and we have the mock-up, and we have the highlight, we have the logo, and the code message. Similar to how the other creative from the same campaign, we have Japan. So this is Tokyo, and the mock-up with the screen where Tokyo's collectibles are placed, the same structure, same background, and same style. Similar to this. Here, in this case, this is India. The background is this is a photo of Mumbai, since the context is of Mumbai with the collectibles of Mumbai, and the flag is of India because Mumbai is part of India. Let me and if we break it down here, you can also see that there are the same groups are there. This is background in different uh, gradients, which were not needed for this creative, but for other creatives. Once again, let me show you how this was done. See, the gradient is differently. That is the App Store badge, the Google Store badge, the mockup, This is the India flag. This is the concentric circle. This is Mumbai. This is the logo. This is the gradient. So we started with the gradient, the logo, added a black and white gradient. Then for the background, there is the Mumbai photo, and we needed to fit it in the specific structure. So there is masking. So there is the concentric circles, but we don't need all of them for this. Hence, once again, there is masking. There comes. Okay, this is. Then the India flag. This is a vector directly from Illustrator. Then we have the WheelCoin, the mock-up of the screen. There is the Google Play badge, App Store badge. This is the okay. This is the core messages and the highlight. And of course, there is pretty similar as this one. Completely same structure, different background, different map, different mockup. Once again, different photo, different mockup, different screen of the mockup. The mockup is also same to make it feel more closer to the campaign style. Different flag. This has different aspects. Exported in Illustrator. This is a separate vector. This is a separate vector. This is the logo background. This is separately exported. This is has been done in here because it's just a rectangle. This has some extra elements because this is more of a one-off creative about a green mobility challenge they were organizing, but the challenge was also posted onto the application as well. Hence, instead of uh, having a completely separate creative, we used the screen from the application for two reasons. Firstly, to to connect it better with rest of the brand, and secondly, to make it easier for people to find it. So now people will know that it's already on the application and what screen they are looking for. And then, of course, there are the different informations. Okay. This has different parts exported in Illustrator and then compiled on Photoshop. This is something that's interesting to break down. Let's break it down. Okay, so here we started out with this core photo. This is the public transport. And as I mentioned, it's the mobility is not just you walking or cycling, it's also the reward system is also connected to using public transport because then you're using emitting a lot more carbon per head compared to a single four-wheeler drive, which was the base level taken for calculating the reward system. And you can see the station is not that important. So we simply added a rectangle to cover it. Luckily, the sky was just one color that came up handy. Uh, in today's context, it would be easier to use the remove background or generative fill to use it, but back then generative fill wasn't introduced yet. So we had to be creative in different ways. Now we use the Wilcon gradient in an overlay setting. You can see that it's set to overlay so that it gives a more branded feel instead of using the base image directly. We're giving a little more branded feel. Then came the different elements. And so this is a screenshot from the application itself. And to make it more distinguishable, we added a outer outline and then use the same outline width on the connector to point out that this guy has just worn this. and save this much CO2. Similarly, for the other person living, similarly screenshot with added outline. This is another aspect of the application where the whole referral system is quite popular in DIY SaaS nowadays, and it was popular even back then. So covering another aspect with the same concept. And then there is the core message, which is this. It's in white because the background is dark. And once again, there is the highlight, which is a gradient, which is a shape that is placed onto it. Like this is the shape placed onto the text. And then find it on App Store and on Play Store. And we added the outline, the colored overlay, because that's easier to make it white. Like instead of coloring it directly, color overlay is an easy way to make things white or whatever color you're looking for. So, when you break it down into tiny elements, it becomes easier. Don't look at it as a whole single thing you're creating. Think about tiny things that you're adding on to make it something different, and those tiny things add up. This is mostly done in Illustrator. Oh, by the way, I need to point out something cool that I figured out why I did it. So this was the um, FIFA icon for the Qatar World Cup, like FIFA World Cup, which was held in Qatar. I forgot which year it is. No, I remember. It's in 2022. Yep. The 2022 Qatar FIFA World Cup held in Qatar. This was the logo they developed for the World Cup, and the cup. And the cup had the trophy cup had a structure which I morphed into this smoke. Uh, you have to remember how the uh, cup looked to get to understand this, but yeah, that's a touch that I did, and I am okay. This will be interesting to take on. Okay, so we took a dark background in this case. We started out with the map. So in this case, the Kazakhstan map is directly a vector with gradient onto it so that it mixes better with the background. Uh, then, of course, the circles came up. As I mentioned, the concentric circles are repeating pattern of this band. Then the flag in a circle. Now it has an outline so that it's visible. And then this is a famous monument. I don't remember what the monument is now, but this is a symbol of Kazakhstan that people associate with Kazakhstan. And then simple mask, because the background is not serving any purpose here. Then comes, yeah, then comes the core message. Now in this case, we are not using this rectangle because that will make it difficult. Instead, we are using rectangles under it to highlight green mobility. And the date, which is December 2. You can see once again that we are using the green for the sustainability misses and the gradient for brand specific misses, or the highlight in this case it is the date. And okay, and yeah, I think that those are the core images. And let's see. Well, thank you all for joining. I mean, it was fun. And the core message is, if I were to summarize everything I said, then the core message will be that when you are working with a brand for its branding and marketing, find out what the brand is about, what the brand is trying to do, the kind of personality the brand is trying to portray itself as, the audience the brand is trying to talk to, and what are the touch points that the brand will exist on. Taking this, find elements that can be repeated, and then keep repeating them in a recognizable pattern. As you keep repeating the patterns, they slowly become recognizable, and as something becomes recognizable, it builds up the brand value. It slowly becomes brand equity. That's how branding works. And yeah, that core summary is applicable to all brands. And yep, thanks again for having here, and like all the best for whatever you're doing next. I hope this comes handy if you're working on a branding for yourself, or you're looking into what your brand needs in case you're trying to manage a team or hire someone to do it for you. So I hope it covers both the aspects. And yeah, that was it. Thanks again for being here, and hope to see you again in whatever next thing we do. And till then, keep creating, keep working, and stay above the ground. Bye bye.